What made Voldemort look like a snake? Why wasn't the Horcrux in Harry destroyed when the basilisk bit him? And what did Dumbledore really see in the mirror of Erised? Hi, I'm Clive. Let's start. Why did Voldemort look like a snake? I mean, he was quite a handsome young man before he turned into the Dark Lord, and when he returned in the Goblet of Fire, he had a completely different appearance. But even before that, his look started changing. When he came to Dumbledore to ask for the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Tom Riddle already had a distorted look with a pale face, and the whites of his eyes looked bloody. This was all due to his experiments with dark magic and the trail of murders he had left behind. It turned the Dark Lord from a human being into the embodiment of nightmares. By willingly splitting his soul into fragments, he made himself into a horrific being. Then, creating the Horcruxes had another enormous impact on Riddle's appearance and made him look just as inhumane as his acts were. Besides, Rowling says that he'd always had an affinity for snakes. After all, he was one of the few who could talk to them, so it made Voldemort want to borrow a few features from the reptiles, such as the slits on his face instead of a nose. And finally, when Peter Pettigrew came to help his master, the Dark Lord managed to get a rudimentary body by drinking a special potion made from snake venom and unicorn blood. And do you remember how Firenze the Centaur said to Harry in the first book that whoever drinks unicorn's blood is cursed from the moment it touches his lips? So that made Voldemort even more inhumane and eventually resulted in his horrifying appearance we saw in the Goblet of Fire. Why wasn't Harry the Horcrux destroyed earlier? At some point, the main trio realized that a basilisk's venom could destroy the Horcruxes. But then you remember that the magical creature bit Harry in the second book, and he almost died because of it. So why didn't the fragment of Voldemort's soul that resided inside of Harry get destroyed back then? Many fans asked this question, and J.K. Rowling even said that she had to answer it at least once a week for 9 years. But the reason is actually pretty simple. It turns out that for the Horcrux to be destroyed, its container had to be damaged beyond repair. So essentially, Harry had to die from the basilisk's venom so that the part of Voldemort's soul inside of him ceased to exist. But remember that Fawkes the Phoenix shed his tears on the boy's wound, thus healing him. It would be a shame if the main character died in the second book, right? So, as a result, the piece of Voldemort's soul kept on living in Harry. Why did Quirrell become corrupt? Obviously, Harry's first defense against the Dark Arts teacher wasn't a good one, but who could have guessed that he was possessed by the Dark Lord? Even the all-knowing Dumbledore had no idea. But how exactly did Quirrell get under the influence of Voldemort? J.K. Rowling once answered this question. The author describes the professor as a delicate young man who had always been timid, and to prove himself to others, he developed an interest in the dark arts. And he decided to find what remained of Voldemort because he had a clue as to where the Dark Wizard could be. Quirrell didn't really think about helping him come back. He only wanted to become famous for tracking the Dark Lord down, and he also fancied learning some skills from him. But it was a mistake to think that he'd be able to control Voldemort. Before Quirrell even knew what was happening, the Dark Wizard had possessed him, and in effect, the young professor became a temporary Horcrux. He now had a much stronger evil soul inside of him, and his physical strength became depleted because of that. Quirrell was forced to remain with his new master till the very end, until Harry's touch damaged his body and Voldemort's essence flew away to save himself. See? Getting involved with dark magic is never a good idea. Were Voldemort's Horcruxes poorly hidden? I mean, couldn't he have taken them somewhere where no one would find them, ever? Like to outer space or the mouth of a volcano? Or at least somewhere outside of Britain? Well, in fact, Voldemort thought that the places he had hidden the Horcruxes were safe enough. He probably never guessed that anyone would find out about them, let alone locate all of them. Besides, they were indestructible. At least he thought so because he had no way of knowing that the main trio would get access to the basilisk's venom. And Voldemort also chose those particular places to hide the Horcruxes because they meant something to him. The school where he first felt at home, his mother's old house, the lake where he scared the kids while he was still at the orphanage, and 2 of the Horcruxes were entrusted to the Dark Lord's most loyal servants, Bellatrix Lestrange and Lucius Malfoy. So it's obvious that Voldy would never think that anyone, especially a group of teenagers, could find and destroy them all. What's the value of the Philosopher's Stone? It could be used for different purposes, turning any metal into gold and creating the elixir of life. So it's pretty clear why Voldemort was trying to steal it. He wanted to use the stone to return to a corporeal form and stop depending on others' bodies. You might remember that he was using the bodies of snakes and other reptiles, and then Quirrell's body while he didn't have his own. After the Dark Lord failed, Dumbledore destroyed the stone so that it didn't get into the wrong hands. But giving immortality isn't the only value it had. If you think about it, the stone has much more meaning to the story. It launches the whole life and death plotline. Harry loses his parents, then mourns them, and almost gets attached to the Mirror of Erised because he sees them in it. But he knows that it's impossible to cheat death and bring them back, and eventually he accepts this fact. This is one of the things that make him different from Voldemort. Unlike the Dark Lord, Harry doesn't fear death. That's why Harry manages to find the stone, unlike his enemy. And by the end, this profound understanding helps him see what it means to be the master of death, and prepares him for the final part of the Deathly Hallows. So as you see, the meaning of the Philosopher's Stone is much deeper than you think. And one more question about the first book. What did Dumbledore see in the Mirror of Erised? When Harry became infatuated with the mirror and the headmaster came to reason with him, Harry asked what he saw in it. Dumbledore answered that he saw himself wearing a pair of thick white woolen socks. He added that one could never have enough good socks. Well, however sweet it sounds, it was definitely a lie. The Harry Potter fandom says that Dumbledore saw two different images in the mirror throughout his life. When he was younger, he saw his former friend Gellert Grindelwald because he had feelings for him and wanted them to be together. But later, that image faded away and gave place to another one. Dumbledore saw his family whole and happy, with his sister Ariana still alive and his brother Aberforth reconciled to him. If you didn't know, Ariana died at a very young age when a three-way duel Albus had with Aberforth and Gellert Grindelwald went wrong. Aberforth blamed his brother for her death, and the family fell apart. If you want to know more about Dumbledore's life story, let us know in the comments below, and we'll make a video about him. How did Voldemort create his Horcruxes? We know from the books and movies that in order to split a soul and place its parts into different objects, one has to kill someone. For Voldemort, who was ready to murder anyone who said a wrong word to him, it wasn't a big deal to find a few more people to use Avada Kedavra on, especially when he knew that it would make him nearly immortal. So whom did he kill to create his Horcruxes? J.K. Rowling answered this question in one of her interviews. To create his first Horcrux, the Diary, he killed the teenage girl who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. It was Moaning Myrtle, of course. To turn Marvolo Gaunt's ring into his second Horcrux, he killed his own father, Tom Riddle. For the Slytherin's locket, he murdered a Muggle tramp. Then there was Madame Hepzibah Smith, who owned Helga Hufflepuff's cup and lost her life for it. An Albanian Muggle peasant died for Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem. Then Voldemort inadvertently made Harry Potter a Horcrux when he killed his mother. And finally, the Dark Lord killed Bertha Jorkins, a Ministry of Magic employee who worked in the Department of Magical Games and Sports, to turn his loyal snake, Nagini, into another one. But even all these hideous efforts didn't let him win. What happened to the trio after the war? We read the books and saw the movies, so we know pretty much everything that happened to the main characters during that time frame. But what did they do after defeating the Dark Lord and starting the beginning of a new peaceful era in the wizarding world? For the Harry Potter fandom, Rowling once shared all about it. Well, first of all, Hermione, being the Hermione we know and love, returned to Hogwarts to take her final year and do her newts. And it's also not surprising that Harry and Ron didn't do that. They just moved on to become Aurors, and according to Rowling, they managed to revolutionize the Auror department in the Ministry. Soon enough, Harry became head of the Auror office, and then head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Ron, in his turn, left his Auror's duties after 2 years and started helping his brother George at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. And Hermione, after finishing school, went to work at the Ministry as well. She began at the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. There, she continued her mission to improve the lives of house elves. And then she went on to work at the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, where she did everything she could to eradicate the oppressive pro-pureblood laws. Rowling once mentioned that the trio eventually helped to transform the Ministry and change the wizarding world. And we wouldn't expect any less of them. Share in the comments below whether you'd like to learn more about what happened to the other characters after Voldemort's downfall. And meanwhile, watch another video we made about how the rules of magic work in the Harry Potter world. And stay awesome!